Good evening, everyone. If you'd like to take your seats, make sure that your cell phones are please turned to silent or off. I'll go ahead and call this study session to order. It's Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. We have one item on our agenda this evening, presentation and discussion on the meet and confer process with Gilbert Police and Fire Labor Associations. Staff, I believe that you're going to kick off this presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we've got a lot of information to cover with you tonight. We're going to have a number of our team members, legal, our two chiefs, representatives from our labor associations, and then HR to cover Arizona state statutes as they govern what is in common vernacular referred to as public sector unions. The statute referred to it as a meet and confer process. So we'll walk you through that and the steps that are part of that. We'll walk you through the history of meet and confer in Gilbert. Talk about the differences between formal and informal processes. We'll hear from Gilbert Fire and PD Labor Association representatives. We'll talk about our current compensation and benefits philosophy as a town, and then there's been some recent Supreme Court rulings that have some impact on meet and confer in Arizona that legal will run through as well. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to legal, and we'll get the discussion started.
When he said legal, it's because he can't remember your name. I'm just kidding.
Was it that obvious?
I know you too well, Patrick. Thank you for that.
Oh, it's true.
Study session, we can be a little fun. Sorry, it's study session, we can be a little fun.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor and council and manager Banjer. I am Amanda Jenkins, an assistant town attorney, and I'm going to be presenting our first few slides here, which just give a general overview of the terms that we're going to be using and the town's own history with the meet and confer process. So first up, we have our definitions. Oh, I have the clicker? Okay. Sorry. I haven't done this before.
It's your first time presenting with us, isn't it, Amanda?
Yes.
Here at a council meeting?
Okay, what am I doing wrong?
Did they give you a secret word that you had to say?
All right. No. All right. Meet and confer is Arizona's version of public labor union negotiations. So what meet and confer is a formalized process that would be codified into city or town code that establishes specific procedures by law for negotiation of employment and personnel issues. And meet and confer then would replace any informal or currently practiced discussion of employment and personnel issues, and it limits them to those procedures that we establish by law. Typically, the goal of a meet and confer is to create or finalize a contract known as the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. The MOU then documents and details all of the employment-related concerns that have been discussed and mutually agreed upon during that meet and confer process. And then finally, although the mutually agreed MOU is created during the meet and confer process, it's not final or binding until council has approved it. And then a general overview of how meet and confer would work for council and the town. As for council, council's role would first be to approve an ordinance adopting the meet and confer procedure. And then finally, after all of the negotiations are settled, council would consider the final proposed MOU that results from those meet and confer negotiations. The role of management and staff here at the town. First, management would develop the procedures for the meet and confer process in accordance with the ordinance. And then staff and management participate in scheduled, usually weekly or bi-weekly negotiations about the proposed MOU. Historically, the town manager did not participate in that part of the process, but town staff was very much involved. And then finally, once all of those negotiations are concluded and a final MOU is agreed upon by all sides, that MOU would be presented to council by the manager's office. The role of the labor associations. Historically, the labor associations have been responsible for producing that initial memorandum of understanding to start off the negotiations, and the Labor Association participate in those scheduled weekly or biweekly meet and confer negotiations to negotiate the MOU going forward. And then the typical guardrails of the MOU, they usually last 2 to 3 years. Some have been as short as 1 year, but commonly it's a 2 to 3 year MOU. And once that MOU has been approved by council, it's closed once approved. And so it's also, those employment and personnel issue negotiations are closed until the next process to negotiate them. And it becomes a binding contract that all the parties must follow. Now, Gilbert has had meet and confer in the past. Just to go way, way back, the town of Gilbert's police department was organized in 1977, and the fire department was organized in 1993. But we didn't have meet and confer until November 13th, 2007, and that's when council approved our first meet and confer ordinance for employee labor associations, and that included police, fire, and all other employees not in supervisory roles. So there were 3 labor associations that met and conferred with town management at that time. The ordinance at that time was quite long. It contained thorough instructions for the entire meet and confer process. And then notably, it had a sunsetting provision that would end meet and negotiations from 2008 to 2013. We know from our notes on the time period that town management met with the labor organizations weekly for approximately 6 months to negotiate the first MOU that went from 2009 to 2010. And they then had, I think, biannual MOUs after that. Then finally, on May 16th, 2013, council accelerated the sunset date of the ordinance, moving it up by 6 months, and that then existing MOU was set to expire on June 30th, 2014, and meet and confer at that point was allowed to expire. And then finally, in February of 2020, council approved the deletion of Section 2-62, which was our meet and confer ordinance, in its entirety, just to update the code to not have an expired policy in there. So that was our history of meet and confer. Do you have any questions thus far?
Seeing none.
All right, thank you.
Greetings, Mayor, Council. Chief Solberg and I are going to present on the next few slides, just giving some additional updates and information about the process of the MOU. I want to talk a little bit about the transition period after the ordinance was repealed in 2013. At this point, the town was committed to ensuring that the benefits held within that last MOU were rolled into the personnel rules and administrative guidelines at the time. So there was a partnership between labor management teams and the HR team to review all those provisions and try to do the best that the team could to ensure those benefits were applied in the personnel rules and the guidelines. A lot of collaboration between the two teams to go through the language and figure out the most effective way to put those benefits into our existing rules and guidelines. Second part that we developed after this was an interest-based policy. This is specific to the fire department. I want to talk just a bit about what that means to say interest-based in a policy in decision-making. Really, it's about collaborative efforts to try to uncover win-win situations and solutions to problems. When we do this, we essentially discuss what any issue on any particular topic, what any issue is on a particular topic. And with that, we need to disclose why that issue is important. Those are the interests related to it. Both sides, whether in a labor management process or in a defined MOU process, essentially come forward and say, this is why this issue is important. Both sides disclose that. Typically, what we find in an effective interest-based discussion is that there are many shared interests between the parties. An example of a shared interest between labor and management, we all are here to serve and protect our members, our residents, and our businesses. Everyone can agree that that's a shared interest and really is at the center of what we do and all the decisions we make, including the dais here today. So as we work through that, we try to find, again, what are the shared interests and which ones are not shared, because there will be some. From there, now we get to solutions. And this is an important part of the process, that we just don't go to make solutions without having some discussions about why it's important on all parties and discuss the implications. We develop multiple solutions, and then we balance those solutions and say which solution satisfies the most interest of both parties. Typically, that's the decision or solution that's best suited because it answers most of those interests. Generally, it's effective. You get transparent conversations that build trust among two parties. So that's kind of when you hear interest-based in discussions, what we kind of define those terms and how they can be very effective, no matter what process council decides is appropriate for the town of Gilbert. From there, we also, at direction from town council through our town manager, to initiate regularly occurring meetings between fire department leadership, police department leadership, and the labor leaders. At the time, Chief Joe Bush began meetings with the labor president at the time, weekly. Upon myself becoming fire chief, we expanded that a little bit. From the very first weeks, expanded to meet with myself and the labor leadership team, which is typically 3 members. Since then, after about a year or so, we decided to expand that out further, where myself and my 2 assistant chiefs, which collectively we call senior staff, meet every Wednesday, or nearly every Wednesday, sometimes schedules on either party collide, to meet with our labor team to discuss whatever issues or questions or concerns they might have, or that we might have, to try to figure out how we can come with some collaborative decisions, but also report out on the progress of all of our labor management teams and the decisions they're making in their process as well, and how we can help them and provide guidance for them or guardrails. Additionally, we're directed to have quarterly meetings between the town manager's office, the chiefs, and our labor leaders. And that's essentially the meeting schedule that we conducted following that. Chief Solberg, I think your schedule might be a little bit different, so I don't want to speak on your behalf on that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just real quick on the PD side, it's very similar to fire, just not as frequently. So we do have written directives amongst from PD and the labor organization on how we will operate. And currently we meet once a month, and it's a standing meeting. If there are needed additional meetings, we're always open to either side, bringing up additional topics that need to be addressed earlier than the monthly meeting that we do have. And as fire has, we also have the quarterly meetings with town management as well to address any other issues that either have been addressed with us or additional issues for citywide perspective. The advantage, as I've experienced here in Gilbert with this type of atmosphere, it's very open. So if there is a new topic, a new issue, they have an open door, and we have a regularly scheduled meeting time. But as I mentioned, we're always open to meet in addition to that. And so we have the advantage of the infrastructure and that discussion of that without the formalized structure of an MOU and a meet and confer. We have the ability to meet as often as need be and discuss those issues. I'll turn it back over to Chief Duggan to talk about the formal versus existing.
So we kind of want to put a slide together that compares so you have some context on generally what the formalized process looked like and what our existing process looks like. So during the MOU negotiation periods, we had weekly meetings of the project team during the negotiation process, mentioned earlier, about 6 months to get through those negotiations. I put on here cross-departmental representation because there was a significant amount of people that were involved in those meetings, typically 2 to 3 labor representatives. We had a representative we had an assistant town manager that was a part of that process, 1 or 2 representatives from the people team. Budget was represented because on some issues there were budgetary concerns that had to be addressed and researched. We had admin support, in part to keep minutes and later on preparation of the contracts. Legal was a part of it. They weren't necessarily in every meeting, but anytime we had questions about the legality of any particular issue or solution, were brought into that as well. So it was a large amount of people, again, committed to the meetings, the weekly meetings at that point that we ran. Come through that process. A different aspect of this to understand, as we talked about in our existing process, how the labor leaders have a chance to meet regularly with the fire chief, police chief, and the town manager's office. In the formalized process, both chiefs and the town manager are excluded from that process. So it's just a different way of doing those negotiations, but it's worth noting that the chiefs and town manager are not represented on the team. From that point, the ratification process, when it's completed, goes through a legal process to get that completed. I won't get into that right now. And then once it's ratified by all parties, implementation of the contract. One of the notes at the bottom here is that any issues, excuse me, that come about after that contract is signed by council, we don't reopen. And so typically any new issues would have to wait until the next cycle to be discussed as a basis of the MOU. Typically 2 years is pretty consistent, 2 to 3 years for contract lengths, primarily because we talked about the workload of up to 6 months just to get through the negotiations. We still have to have the contract written, legal review, and then kind of go through some process to make sure budgetary impacts, if any, are addressed. So typically, most agencies go with a 2 to 3 contract year period, because if not, you essentially are in a constant state of contract negotiations if it's just done annually. That was our experience in the past. As we look to our existing process, I mentioned the Labor Management Alliance policy for fire. It's important to note that this policy describes, again, how we develop solutions and answers to problems. We utilize our labor management processes and our committees to probably answer 90% of our questions and answers and how we operate and make decisions. 10% of those sometimes will fall outside the bounds and might resort to management decision. But for the most part, probably 90% of our regular operating decisions are made by our committees in that process. Management ideally will set the boundaries within what those decisions, how they can be made, and are also involved in setting our interests based on management when we come forward in that interest-based approach. We talked about the meeting schedule, so we don't need to go further on that one. The difference that we look at now is how we address new issues. So the flexibility, we have the rigidity and the kind of focus of the formal process. However, in the existing process, we have more opportunities to address emerging issues. We don't have to wait for the next contract period to discuss an emerging issue. I'll give a couple examples of those. We'll talk about them again just in a bit. But in 2023, we increased for sworn the vacation max balance. That was directly related to kind of a long-term effect of COVID and our inability of our crews to use vacation leave. That was an issue brought forward by our labor team. When the town made a decision, we're going to cut it off at this date, we recognized that because of some limitations of our vacation, employees mathematically could not take the vacation they had earned within the time frame that it was going to expire. So that's a good example of the flexibility and benefit that came forward with our existing process. The next one that came forward was actually the top-out pay. That was brought forward by the town manager's office, recognizing the market shifts that were occurring at the time. We had the flexibility then, Patrick and team, to bring forward the recommendation of top-out pay for sworn. So those are just kind of two examples of how the flexibility can benefit the groups outside of the contract, because had we been bound inside of a contract, we wouldn't have been able to address those two particular issues until the contract period expired.
Chiefs, are you open to take some questions in between? Because I think it's a lot of information, so. Councilmember Tilkey?
Thank you, Mayor. Could you go back a slide, please? Thanks. You said that the town manager, it looks like, I don't know if it's just the manager or his office, and chiefs are not allowed to be part of, or were not in the formal agreement to be part of this negotiation project team. Who is representing the town of Gilbert then? in those meetings?
In the past process, we had an assistant town manager.
Okay.
And then people team member, whether director or designee, budget representative through that process were the main, and then administrative support. So those were the main, really assistant town manager, HR director, assistant fire chief, assistant police chief as well. I should have mentioned that before. I think I missed that one.
Okay.
So the assistant chiefs come forward to the meeting to have those discussions, to represent management interests.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions at this time for the chiefs? Thanks, chiefs.
Of course, at this
Sorry.
point.
Sorry,
oh,
Councilmember
we have one
Kowalski
more
turned her
question.
mic on. Thank you.
You talked about some of the flexibility, and thanks for giving those examples. Do you have any additional insight as to challenges that other communities that had Meet and Confer and what they faced during like times of crisis, like the past few years when we did have the pandemic and the rapid changes in employment compensation?
Oh, kind of, Mayor and Councilmember Kaprowski. Some of, we reviewed a lot of the MOUs that are existing in the valley, and as Chief Duggan kind of mentioned, they're very specific in, I'll give an example of an agency that they are, for PD, they're required to be third or just above third, so it's between second and third. And so I would say the challenges are financial. So if you have a contract that requires you to do X, Y, and Z, the potential in a downturn or in a crisis of limited availability of funds, that something else outside of that contract is going to have to be adjusted. That's a loose example. Labor may have some examples as well. They're going to be coming up next, and we can certainly, we have a few more examples as we proceed with this. We can address some additional ones if you have any.
And again, with this, we're going to turn things over, I think, to Shay and Dakota to come forward. They have a presentation for you as well.
1 second, I just had Councilmember Bongiovanni turn his mic on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we able, in those situations that you just spoke about, can we have, is it possible to have in the contract that if both parties mutually agree that we can intervene again and be able to make those changes that are needed?
That there are some contract language that will allow a reopener if both parties agree there's mutual benefit.
Okay, thank you.
If no more, we'll turn it over. Shay and Dakota, I believe the floor is yours.
Great. Are they going to come to the center podium? I think Shay, please. Thank you. Chief, you can shut that microphone off, please. Thank you. Shay, you'll have to push the button, and I think they put a sticker on it now to tell you which button to turn on. There we go.
Yeah.
I usually have to say, push a button, I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, there's a sticker on it. Yeah. Thank you, Chief Duggan, Chief Solberg, for the introduction and legal. Madam Mayor and esteemed council members, I really just want to start off by thanking you for giving us the opportunity to present why the MOU and Meet and Confer is such a strong item for the town of Gilbert. To touch on Chief Solberg's point a little bit really quick is one of the items that you talked about is being able to reopen things. Town council can absolutely have the opportunity to reopen. And then in some of the tougher times that we have, the MOU process allows us to meet and discuss items that are beneficial to both parties. So in Phoenix and Mesa, their jobs were actually saved by doing pay freezes in the MOU process. So it saves the town money, but it also saves the jobs of the people that are already working and are already a part of our family. So there are a lot of positives that can come out in very tough financial times for an MOU. So Meet and Confer is an evolution of organized employee and employer communications. The general principles were actually developed right here in Arizona. Constant evaluation over the last 40 years has brought effective and non-contentious working relationships. And the guiding principles are communication, accountability, transparency, and collaboration. Many of the same themes that we have in our town already exist. Back in the 60s and 70s, Phoenix and Tucson, several school districts experienced discord between labor and management. The parties looked for creative solutions since state law prevented collective bargaining, and elected officials got together and created Meet and Confer. Collective bargaining is really adversarial. Demands, proposals, counter proposals. Contracts are binding and can be enforced by the courts, and the process weaponizes strikes and lockouts and slowdowns, and we don't believe collective bargaining is in any way emulates meet and confer, and we don't believe it's an effective process. But what makes meet and confer different is its interest-based decision-making, just like Chief Duggan alluded to. It produces a memorandum of understanding, and the MOUs are governed by the town council. So the governing body has final decision-making power and can accept, reject, or modify the MOU agreement with all parties. Why is meet and confer so successful? Because the process is built off of labor and management working together to address these mutual interests. Public safety groups have tremendous resources and collaborative ideas for a variety of solutions and enhancements for any town. Elected and appointed labor representatives provide a singular voice rather than having 100 individuals' ideas, requests, and solutions. It's important to note that no employee is required to join a union, and we have a large percentage of our population within the fire department that are not a part of the IAFF. I just happen to be the elected delegate to represent our employee group. So this is really a contract within employee group, not a labor union or a union contract. So without meet and confer, association representatives become compelled to go directly to council. If we can create meet and confer, it gives us a little bit better process without having to do that. It strengthens the labor management process that we have now. All parties are expected to work together in good faith and with an eye for collaboration, understanding, and effective solutions. The process can include ground rules, and in a rare event where parties are unable to reach agreement, mediation could be utilized if needed to. All agreements and disputes are ultimately decided by town council members. Interest-based negotiations strives for mutual understanding and common education for both labor and management, focus on goals, concerns that are common for both parties. Labor and management each present and explain their requests and their needs, and the ensuing discussion revolves around ways to meet those needs. So this is the opportunity to really be able to understand each other, understand labor, and understand management, and it gives us the opportunity to work together to be able to really understand what the interest is of the other party, and that's ultimately what will create the most positive outcome for our employee group. This style of negotiating is incredibly positive and creates a collaborative partnership. And many modern union management contracts are bargained very successfully using this style, but the results are a win-win situation for all of us. Some of the advantages are helps manage effectively address varying issues of diverse employee groups, allows for flexibility for economic changes, kind of like we talked about in some of the very tough times. There are opportunity for the MOU to really come up with a decision that we both own responsibility of, labor and management, and we share that responsibility in order to protect our town and the citizens and the budgets that we have. It provides an organized conduit for employee and employer communications, thereby preventing issues from going before council on a regular basis. Significantly expands employee understanding of budget, policy, and issues, and increases transparency for employee-employer issues. The transparency part here is really about just learning what it means to think like our town manager, our town manager's office, our town council members. It gives us the opportunity to share each other's ideas and to understand why the reasons are that we do things, and gives us the opportunity to talk about those and to learn about them. It provides effective solutions to issues from employee groups often identified well before management has it on their radar. It supports safer working conditions, saves time, effort, and money, improves leadership development through a collaborative process. There's a lot of really big points in here that are super important to us, but leadership development is one of the biggest ones. It allows future leaders of our organization, that rise through the ranks to already understand what it means to look at budgets and to come up with collaborative solutions, which is the cornerstone of what we all do anyway. It can save time, effort, and money with the ability to actually have and create committees that come out of maybe an agreement with an MOU or an item on an MOU. It means that our workforce will be the ones doing the workload rather than having to hire a third party or go outside. 457 could be a potential option of that, where we have elected or appointed members that actually will operate that committee. They will do the RFP processes in order to save the town money, and first responders working with the 457 plan, essentially. We're a right-to-work state. State laws permitted by Section 14B of the Taft-Hartley Act that provide in general that employees are not required to join a union as a condition of getting or retaining a job. And right-to-work laws forbid unions and employers to enter into agreements requiring to enter a union or pay dues in order to keep or get a job. So the right-to-work state, we're in no violation of right-to-work laws by entering into a meet and confer. But like I also said, not all of our members are union members. This is about our employee group. Who else uses meet and confer? This is a list of, I believe, 39 other government entities around the valley and the state that use meet and confer. They use it because it's an effective process. So there's history of positive results, jobs saved, including Phoenix, Mesa, and Gilbert. Phoenix and Mesa specifically came out of the MOU and had the pay freezes in order to save jobs. Fire and police involvement in campaigning that supports economic growth, the items that oftentimes can be contentious to our citizens. It gives us the opportunity to understand and to be able to join forces for those things. Also involvement in the district revenue increases, involvement in district revenue protection. There could be significant employer-employee savings from 457 plans that I touched on. Social Security savings, that the town doesn't currently pay Social Security for first responders, and that came out of a labor management discussion, many years before myself. But it's a benefit that we don't get, and that's okay. Again, things come out of the MOU from labor management discussions. There's positive solutions for pension reform. Pension reform has happened very often over the last 10 years and will continue to do so because of labor management relationships, leadership development, and management perspective. So I have a lot of quotes here. I'm going to save, I respect your guys' time too much to go through them, but I hope you'll have access to this slide. But the important note here is that some of the quotes that I have are from city managers, they're from town council members, they're from elected officials, they're from every walk and side of the aisle here, and it's because meet and confer is such a successful process. So former Mesa city manager, this was Prop 476 that happened in Mesa last year, that passed with a 71% in the city of Mesa. So we can understand that a city definitely can support it in a city like Mesa with 71%. Tempe city manager, former Tempe city manager Will Manley. Joan Kruger, Gilbert Vice Mayor, was very much in support. She actually talks about Brian Jeffries, who is the former president of Local 2260, told us, Gilbert Town Council, that meet and confer was up and running. All parties would find that it would work out despite some early trepidation. Well, you're 100% right. Reports from the city manager's office and from the employee groups have all been very positive since we implemented meet and confer in Gilbert. So there's history here in Gilbert. This is Mayor Phil Gordon of the city of Phoenix. I felt like I had to include him because my father actually worked for Mayor Phil Gordon, and I was very small when I met him, and he was always somebody who I looked up to. But to run as such a large organization and to be utilizing meet and confer, I just respect that highly. So quotes endorsed by the Chandler City Council when Chandler was going through their step to obtain meet and confer. And then this is actually a quote from the Arizona Republic from 2014. It's important to note that there were much greater men than myself that were in this position at one point, one of which is our current fire chief. But the quote says, "The ordinance enabled us to take issues of wages, benefits, and working conditions forward to policymakers for consensus," which was a better way to do it. Everyone was in one room working on issues and interests together for solutions to problems we could all live with. Now you're dealing with every city employee, and it's inefficient. Chief Joe Bush, Fire Chief Joe Bush at the time echoed that belief that the process built good relationships. From going through several years of meet and confer, it allowed us to continue forward with a good relationship between management and labor. It's important to note here that if an MOU does happen, the labor management process is only strengthened. Chief Solberg and Fire Chief Duggan talked about, there's some pros and cons to the meet and confer, which there's pros and cons, of course, to everything. But they did discuss that there was a more formalized process, which, yes, there is. The formalized process gives us accountability on both sides of the street. But the labor management process that happens on a weekly basis should not and will not go away, I don't believe. I believe Chief Duggan, and I can only speak for fire here, but we've done an incredible job over the last 2 years to building a really strong labor management relationship and labor management process in Gilbert, and that only continues to grow, and the MOU is only the opportunity to strengthen that. So what about the rest of Team Gilbert? We are still Team Gilbert. It's really important here that all employees do have the right to organize if they want to. But for us, we're first responders. We're not better than anybody, but we are different for inherent reasons. We are sworn officers of public safety. The people that I work with risk their lives every single day. Every time we go out on a call with lights and sirens is the most dangerous thing we can do all the time. So I think it's important to note that this MOU is the support for those people who are risking our lives for our community, for this wonderful town of Gilbert. Recruitment and retention of first responders is vital for the service that we provide, and we provide an extremely high level of service. Gilbert loves to boast about how safe of a community that this is, and it is because of the people that we work with. So the support to support those who risk our lives is what we're asking for. Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, they'll actually provide training to us, the town of Gilbert, through this process, and they do it at no charge. So this is an opportunity for leadership development, for us to learn about each other, and to learn how do we create the best MOU process for us together. The MOU, the meet and confer, is process that will be built together. So even if we vote yes, it doesn't mean that it's yes and we do it exactly the way we want or exactly the way you want. This is a process that we get to build together and we get to learn about it together. It's been a long time since we've had it here, so we're kind of all starting fresh, and we get to build it exactly the way it fits for the town of Gilbert. So just closing up, Meet and Confer is built on communication, accountability, and collaboration. It's centered around interest-based negotiations, increased transparency and understanding, and it's not collective bargaining. It's good faith, interest-based decision-making. Strikes and job slowdown actions are strictly forbidden. Employees are not compelled in any way to form and join a union. That doesn't change. And Meet and Confer has a proven track record of positive results. And we have training that can be offered from our Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services. So that's all I have for you guys. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe Dan Browse and Dakota are here to represent Gilbert, so I can either come back up to answer your questions or I can answer any questions that you have now.
Thanks,
you.
Shay. I want to say thank you for stepping up to serve your fellow firefighters in Gilbert Fire and Rescue, and you look very nice in your suit.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever seen you in street clothes before, so I had
Thank
to
you.
say something. Any questions for Shay at this time? Councilmember Kaprowski.
Hi, Shay. Good to see you.
Me too.
You mentioned a few things of the positive benefits of having the meet and confer, and I wanted to touch upon a couple of those. One was the dispute resolution, and the other was improved working conditions. Regarding the dispute resolution, you mentioned that ultimately that's decided by town council. How do you envision the relationship and coordination with town council in the MOU process leading to that dispute resolution?
Thank you, Councilmember Kaprowski. I believe that the role of the town council is really to just solidify everything at the end. I believe that the MOU has the opportunity for us to sit down with the town manager's office and other representatives that come out of this process. But it gives us the opportunity to come up with solutions for various issues that we have or to make us or the town better. But the town council's role is to just solidify that. If there is a mediation needed, or if there's one particular item, that is something that could be brought forward to council to be discussed. But the reality is it removes the drama, it removes the ability to continually kind of beg for items, and it just allows us to have a conversation and create a formalized process so we can sit down and do that together and both of us own responsibility for it.
What's the risk if the town council doesn't approve the MOU? And I guess for me, one of my concerns is I don't understand the job of being a sworn personnel.
Sure.
So how do you work through those issues?
I believe that, that is why we exist as a labor group, is that we have the ability to create relationships and explain why we either need or do the things that we do. I don't believe that anybody ever needs to understand exactly what we do or exactly what we go through for various reasons. It's a very tough and challenging job. And so the general population knows that, generally they support police and fire, and we're extremely appreciative of that. So I think the part that is unknown, there is still a lot of unknown for me as well. I've been in this position, I've only been with the town of Gilbert for 7 years, and there is still a lot of unknown. But the good part about it is that you guys are the sitting members, and I'm the elected official right now. We get to create this together. So some of those questions will be answered either through the Federal Mediation Conciliation Service or through our ability to create this MOU together.
Thank you. I just want to make one more comment regarding the note about the improved working conditions. And I just wanted to make a comment that regardless of where this conversation goes, that's a high priority for me, and I'm sure a lot of other council members. So if there is anything in that space, please bring that up.
I appreciate that, Young, and there's nothing specific that, it's really a principle of the MOU that allows us to have better working conditions, but we work for a great organization. I'm very proud of the town of Gilbert and the people that I work for. So, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Shay, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if you're the one that can answer this or somebody else in management maybe, but were there specific issues that led to sunsetting the MOU in 2013?
I'm certainly not the person to speak on that because I wasn't here at the time. I know a little bit of the history, but it's all word of mouth. So anything that I would say wouldn't be factual. I don't know if
Chief Duggan might know.
Yes, Vice Mayor, Council, Mayor. The biggest change that occurred from the creation of the ordinance into the decision to shorten the sunset was there was a shift in the makeup of the council following that, and the political shift towards not having the MOU. That's the simplest way to describe it. Was there was a shift to the makeup of the council, and the direction of the new council was to sunset it early instead of allowing it just to sunset on its own.
So it wasn't a process problem, it was a different problem.
We had a different makeup of council from when it was created to when it was stricken before the sunset clause.
Thank you.
Councilmember Torgerson?
Chief Duggan? Calling it political, it's a little too vague for me. What were their points in saying that they didn't want it? Was it purely just a political ideology thing on their part, or was there something specific that they didn't like?
I don't have specific recollection of the reasons that were given, other than the opportunity came before the council members brought it forward to strike it, but I don't recall the specific examples or issues that they had related to the process at the time. It's a bit too long ago for me.
Any other questions for Shay? Councilmember Tilkey?
Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment. I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation, but have the opportunity to ask Shay to come up. Okay.
Absolutely. I was gonna say that anyway. I'll just tell him, come back up, Shay. Okay, thanks,
Thank
Shay.
you all very much.
Yeah. And Dan and Dakota are coming up now for GPLA. You will probably have to lift
I
that
may
mic
have
up,
to lift it
Dakota.
just a little bit. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that one definitely won't work.
That one's better for Dan, right?
Yes. Good evening, council and mayor. Thanks for having us, being willing to hear us speak. So my name is Dakota Richter. I'm the new president of GPLA. I've been with the board of GPLA, which has most of the members, police officers with Gilbert PD. I've been with our board for about 2 years, but just recently was voted in for president. And so today, in my place of speaking is Dan Brous. He's been with GPLA for about 15 years. And he was actually here right before or right as it was being written, through the whole process, and then also was here when it went away, and also has been part of the labor side of things for the entire time, GPLA, things like that. So Dan is going to speak on his experience, and then we can answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, Dan Brous. I've been an employee of Gilbert about 17 and a half years. We began Meet and Confer in 2008. I was on the team for 5 years. I remember meeting every year. I don't remember off years. I think after the first MOU was written, each year it was amended, changed. Little issues came up that we were able to reopen. There was a reopener clause in the MOU each year, and it was solely dedicated to compensation because if you remember, 2008 to 2013 were some of our worst economic times. So we did 5 years of the MOU process all without spending any money. And we were able to do it, and we did it cordially and went through the process fairly simple each year, outside of the first year of actually creating the living document. Some of the positives that Shay touched on, I'll just go over real quick. I don't want to go over too much, but the collaboration of ideas, there were management issues and there were police department line level issues that were brought to the table, and we worked through the IBB process completely cordially and solved a lot of our issues. The open communication, there was open dialogue. Management always, I heard earlier, there was a management representative, which was the assistant town manager, and there was a commander at the time because we didn't have assistant chiefs back then. So we had a commander representative. So they were the direct link back to the manager and the chief. So while our chiefs are in a million meetings a month, there's one less meeting they had to attend, and their designee would report back to them. We had a great sense of trust. There was nothing hidden in the room. There was nothing withheld from us. Budget was open. There was no money, and we worked with that. Everything we came to a mutual agreement on. There were lots of things unique to the police department, which I'm going to get into in a second, that we lost, that we were able to come to the consensus, and we did this agreement with our thumbs up, as the FMCS taught us how to do. One of the things is the beneficial filtering of ideas. Shay touched on, where if every employee wanted to have their concerns heard, it would be a lot of work for council, management, chiefs. This was a filtering of taking the most important, the most popular ideas and bringing them forward to be placed in the MOU. And again, the decision-making authority lies with the council. The MOU appeal process, if an employee had an appeal of something in the MOU, they would go to their supervisor first and then start to move up the ranks. But if it was an appeal of something on the MOU that couldn't be resolved, then you started with the chief, and then it came back to the manager, and then the council could make final decision-making on it. It's in the MOU that I read. So some of the things we lost, and I'll touch on that real quick, is we have no formal agreement process. We do meet with, I no longer do, Dakota does, with management and the chief. They are great meetings, but there's no formal agreement process that's done, where when we do agree on something, we put it in words and we move forward. So initially, the
Chief Duggan said that a lot of the MOU benefits were incorporated into personnel rules. They were, and then since 2013, some things have been slowly taken out of personnel rules. So something that would be unique to the police department, court pay, shift differential, standby pay, other disciplinary rules because of Peace Officer Bill of Rights have slowly been taken out of personnel rules because it doesn't apply to all of the employees in the city. So there was sick incentive, discipline advisory board, ability for alternative work schedules, all things that may not apply to the rest of the town. So that's the only thing that really is lost in what the MOU does is gives police department a way, or police officers a way to meet with their manager and town management to talk about things that are specifically related to the police department that you can't put in personnel rules because it just doesn't apply to other parts of the town. And that is all.
Any questions for Dan and Dakota? At this time, we can always ask them to come back up. Seeing none, thanks. Thank you both for stepping up again to support the Gilbert Police Department. Thank you. Chiefs, back up.
We're back. Mayor and council, appreciate both labor groups and their representatives bringing up a lot of positive things that have come from the labor groups. And we're going to talk now about some from our perspective of some of the positive as well. But I do want to emphasize one thing in noticing their list and our list, that those lists pretty much are accomplishments over the last 10 years. And keep in mind, we have not had an MOU or a meet and confer process over the 10 years, which to me is reflective of we are open, both chiefs, both departments, management in conjunction with council on bringing forward ideas, and whether it be benefits, schedules, a lot of examples on the fire side of tweaking and making things better based on input from council. Not to discredit the positives that they mentioned, I fully support a lot of those. A lot of those comes from the political side as well. They have the ability of doing things politically that we cannot do as city employees, town employees. So getting back to our presentation, on the police side, and we had a very long list for both PD and fire, but we wanted to highlight some of the most impactful over the last couple of years. And as was mentioned, and you'll hear from Rob as well, Chief Duggan as well, the sworn top-out pay that was proposed by management last year or 2 years. I think it's been 2 years now. Our employee group came forward with the request for increased FTO pay. Part of that was based on what we were seeing in other jurisdictions, but also the difficulty in getting officers to volunteer to train other employees, and we worked together to establish that increase. It used to be 5%, we increased it to 10% while they're training new recruits, and not only did it apply to our officers, but also we applied to our dispatchers and our detention as well. And then in FTO incentive leave, about 3 or 4 years ago, we increased an additional benefit for those who are trainers, giving them a discretionary leave day every 6 months. So 2 leave days each year if they are trainers. They get additional leave that they can take. And then also we increased our lateral start pay, again, in consultation with our labor groups, looking at what other agencies are bringing their laterals on. And their probation time. When we used to hire a lateral, we'd bring them in at the 0 step, which is the lowest paid level. And then once they were done with training, we would move them up to their actual, if they had 7 years of experience, they would move up to that level. So looking and working with the labor groups, we were able to look at that process and improve it, to which helped us with recruiting laterals so that they're not losing pay. If you're a topped-out officer at another jurisdiction and you want to come here, you can start day one at our topped-out pay level, and start that process and adjusting the probation period as well, so that it was streamlined and consistent. I'll turn it over to Chief Duggan to talk about some of the advantages and accomplishments from fire.
Mayor, Council, thank you again. And also, just want to acknowledge, Chief Solberg did, the feedback and perspective provided by the labor leaders here tonight. I appreciate your approach, appreciate your perspectives on the discussion and how you conduct yourself, so thank you for that. And having a chance to work with Shay directly for 2 years is an amazing human being, has an incredible heart and passion for what he does. And just want to reaffirm, I will speak for myself and Chief Solberg and Patrick, that we are fully committed to continuing to advance their labor management relationship here in the town of Gilbert and improving our ability to protect and serve our members, our residents, and our businesses throughout the city. So just want to continue to make sure that we understand that. Talking a little bit about accomplishments, we've already mentioned the sworn top help pay. I won't go back into that. One area we're very proud of is really class-leading efforts to expand our cancer screening through many budget packages supported by council. We've added second set of turnouts over the preventative side of things, enhancement of our full-body MRIs and blood testing, not only for our current members, but for retirees. That's something we're very proud of for adding those benefits to the teams and our commitment to preventing and uncovering cancers early so we can save the lives of our members. We talked about the increase of the vacation max. I won't go into that again. The last one I will mention, which was a significant achievement, was the switch on July 22nd for the fire department to switch from our previous schedule to the 4896 schedule. This one's worth noting because the two previous fire chiefs, no disrespect to the decisions made, but at that point did not support the decision to switch to the 4896. Coming into my position, I knew that this was going to be probably the labor management arena, probably had the greatest impact to my legacy as fire chief, knowing this decision was coming back. And so we took time to put together a labor management team, about 17 members with representative across the whole organization, including management, to research this topic yet again, because we knew how impactful it was to our employees. And really what it came down to, kind of 4 tenets on this, is the cost of living in Gilbert has risen so much that it's difficult for our least tenured members to afford housing here in Gilbert. And those that choose to live farther, unfortunately, fuel costs are making that also difficult as well. So if you're living farther from Gilbert because you have to, your fuel costs are starting to increase as well and don't seem to be going down. We saw a reduction in applicants for the fire department over the last few years, so we were seeking opportunities to cast a wider net to increase those numbers. I'm happy to say we have increased over 640 our last recruitment, almost double from the last one. And last, and probably most important, we wanted to research the impact on work-life balance for our members and how their lives could be positively impacted by the schedule. And after the team did the work, produced a report for the town manager's office that made it clear now was the time to convert to the schedule. And it was, again, this was done by the work of the Labor Management Committee, and our existing processes put together an incredible report that told the story of the impact, the positive impact this was going to have on our employees. And then happy to report support from the town manager's office. We were able to implement that and to be able to go back to the stations and talk to the firefighters about how is it different, how is this impacting you, to hear their stories already about the impact the schedule is having to really improve their lives. And again, make them more fulfilling in work. So I bring that up as just some of the major accomplishments that we've done so far through that process. And I believe with this, we're going to transition presentation. Unless there's any other questions, Chief Solberg and I will turn over to Nathan.
Mayor Peterson, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to come up. I'm going to just share some additional insights from a town sort of comp and benefits perspective. And one of the things you'll see here, we've got some really great townwide accomplishments we've been able to deploy in the last several years that have had especially a tremendous impact in a positive way on our public safety spaces. Our paid parental leave program, if you're not familiar, we have an opportunity for a new parent, whether it be a father or a mother, through birth, adoption, or foster, to take 4 weeks paid by the town of leave. And this is an item that is actually used on a higher basis per employee within our public safety spaces than anywhere else in the town. So that's something we're really proud of and is being utilized really well. We've got a great Babies at Work program that has received statewide and national press. We expanded our program, our injury leave program, to include what we call catastrophic injury leave. This is something that has been utilized within our police department. And then our expansion of our military leave program, we far exceed the federal requirement for supplementing active military when they are called out for duty and called up. And this is another item that on a per employee basis, our public safety spaces have more active military than anywhere else in the town. The other piece that I think is important is just kind of a refresh for all of you in the compensation and benefits area. First off, just as this is kind of a summary, my own words. This isn't how it's stated exactly in the personnel policies. That's just because it's much more word heavy there. But as a reminder, our compensation philosophy is set up in such a way to ensure that we have a fair and equitable program across classifications in line with the market rate. And as a reminder, market rate is defined as the midpoint of the market, and that is a philosophy that is voted on and approved by all of you. And it's obviously at your purview if you would like to see changes to that compensation philosophy. The other thing that is important along those lines is that there's other sort of approaches being utilized outside of Gilbert with some of our neighboring cities and towns. And I wanted to address some of those just to give you some perspective. We've seen Chandler and Tempe are both now in a fight to be the third among benchmark cities. That's difficult to both be third. And that's an ever-moving target because as a city benchmarks, those numbers change. We've done some analysis on that, and if we wanted to be tied for third with these other two cities, that would run about $3.3 million of immediate cost impacts just for public safety and approximately 12.4 across the organization. Obviously, keep in mind, those are now numbers. Those numbers grow as the market grows and increases pay rates. And so those numbers would grow year over year over year. Next, we've learned that Queen Creek is aiming to be the 60th percentile. So where we are midpoint or 50th percentile, Queen Creek has been aiming for about 60th percentile as they're in growth mode and they're needing to recruit in pretty large numbers for their city size. We ran the numbers again. That would run about $2.5 million of cost just for the foreseeable future for Sworn, and about $6.2 million townwide if we were to mirror that program. The next, I'll talk a little bit because we all know we've heard about it. It's been raised by. It's been brought up by labor. It's been brought up obviously in council retreats and in discussions that we've had. We know that Mesa announced a post-retirement health plan at the regular employee premium cost. As a reminder, as you've seen these numbers before, we hired out an actuarial study on that. So that was done by a licensed and certified actuarial group through our plan administrator. And they came back that direct premium payments would go to about $365,000 in year one, but up to about $6 million annually over a 20-year cycle if we were to mimic Mesa's program. And then the OPEB liability, which is just a reminder, is the post-employment benefit, right? Just the kind of insurance or healthcare impact to our plan would start off around $1 million in increased costs, but would exceed $250 million over 20 years. So that is quite an extensive program that Mesa's been able to roll out. Now, I want to say, as we've pointed out before, that's not to say there are no options. We continue to explore opportunities and options to provide and help our workforce mitigate the cost and the rising cost of healthcare, not only as employees, but post-employment. We recognize that our public safety professionals are especially challenged in this because they retire oftentimes younger because they've given 20, 25, 30 years, and they have an opportunity to retire well before they may be eligible for Medicaid programs, things of that nature. And so we continue to explore opportunities to support these needs across our workforce. The other thing I wanted to just point out, in a way, we benefit today from other cities' MOU programs, because when we benchmark, our pay changes based on the MOUs that exist out there and are being, the rates that are changing. So even the examples I showed you earlier with Tempe and Chandler and Queen Creek, those are those are directly affecting our pay rates because we are moving rates up to try to stay on par with the market rate. And so just as a reminder there to kind of how the math and the process works. The last thing I wanted to just kind of touch on is I recognize, and I think organizationally we recognize the amazing work that our public safety personnel do every day. I think Shay said it really well, that these are first responders. These are folks that they put their lives on the line daily, and we work very hard to take good care and support our public safety as a result of that hard work and that risk that they put out there. We've expanded, as you all know, and offered tremendous wellness resources, mental health resources, counseling resources, expanded our access to EAP, which is free healthcare sources or mental health resources. All of those things are in an effort to be more mindful of the ever-growing needs of the workforce. But I do want to say, you know, our sworn personnel represents about 1/3 of our workforce, right? So we have to be mindful of the other 2/3. Now, Shay mentioned that the rest of the workforce certainly has the option to be supported or represented by a labor association. You know, I've worked in organizations where we've had broad-based professional labor associations. Those become a little more difficult because the needs of various types of professionals across various classifications and industries and skill sets, those needs differ. And so while the labor association within a sworn space is working with a particular group of individuals, we want to be mindful of how do we make sure that the voices of our entire workforce are being heard and taken into consideration. The last thing, you know, again, I know we've talked about this in other contexts that I've had an opportunity to speak with all of you. Gilbert, we make a concerted effort to try to be mindful of our entire workforce. You know, we are, as I think Shay even referenced, we are one team. We are one team Gilbert. And there are individuals across this organization that put everything they have into this work every day. I'll give you a couple examples. The role of a solid waste operator is one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. It is the only job in the town of Gilbert that shows up on the most dangerous jobs top 10 list. The role of app developers within our IT department and CDL drivers are some of the hardest jobs to recruit right now. And so being mindful of finding creative ways to recruit and to retain these tough positions is not something that is exclusive or an exception to public safety only. It is something we have to be mindful of and relentlessly committed to every day across this organization. And then the other thing, there was a reference to this earlier. We did a little bit of quick analysis. Considerations around the meet and confer process. This is based on the historical data. When this was done in years past, we were able to put together kind of the current financial impact of just the meetings. Those run about $30,000 a year, just the cost to hold the meetings. Now that doesn't include research, work time outside of those meetings, which is extensive. You know, can take 2 to 3 times the amount of time that is spent in the actual meetings. And then again, this is only based on the 2 public safety associations and the meet and confer process that exist. And then, as was mentioned, there are complementary resources to facilitation. Sometimes you're under the, you're based on the calendar that might be very limited as far as access to those resources. And so based on our calendar, if there were a meet and confer process in place, we may have to hire out legal help and or facilitation to ensure that we can stick to the calendar and the guidelines that have been set up should there be an ordinance. So I think with that, does somebody want to, go ahead, Chris.
Mayor, Council, this is the final slide, and I know we're running out of time here. Yes, just wanted to remind Council that, you know, anything that you do, whether you're creating an ordinance or you're approving a contract, we're all subject always to state law and to constraints of the U.S. and Arizona Constitution. This court case up here is a recent court case where a MOU between the city of Phoenix and a group of 1,200 skilled laborers was challenged. And while the city and the Labor Association won at the Court of Appeals, or the trial court and Court of Appeals, the Arizona Supreme Court overturned that and found that the way that MOU was set up was a violation of the gift clause. So there have been a number of cases over the last 20 years of challenges to certain aspects of MOU, so that's something to keep in mind. Those have done with the consideration the way leave is given. It's also dealt with challenges to open meeting laws as well as public records and the negotiations. So something to keep in mind that there are people that out there watching the way these MOUs are set up, the ordinances are in place, and we have to be very careful, if that's something council wants to consider, that we craft everything in a way that will not violate the gift clause or any other law. It's also difficult because at times it seems like it's a moving goalpost. I know with the city of Phoenix in this case, when they negotiated the MOU and the council approved it, it was the law at the time. Our current Arizona Supreme Court takes a different view than the prior Supreme Courts did. So that's always something to be careful. Even if something is vetted and 100% correct, doesn't mean it can't be challenged, and you won't find a court that will overturn it, even though it's been precedent for a long time.
Thank you, Nathan and Chris. We will move to some questions. Councilmember Torgerson.
I'm curious, you'd mentioned it costs $30,000 for meet to meet and do that. What is the current cost of the way the meetings are set up now?
The meetings between labor and manager's office?
The ones they've described as what's going on now as opposed to MOUs.
That's a good question. I wasn't asked to crunch those numbers, but I'd say, and Patrick, maybe you know who's in those meetings typically? Not asking you to do the math, of course, but.
Yeah, I meet once a quarter with both the associations. They last about an hour and a half or so. We could crunch those numbers for you, just hadn't done it as of this time.
Right, but there's a difference in cost, but it's not just an additional 30,000. It's offset somewhere with other meetings, correct?
I believe that would be correct. I do think the frequency of meetings under the MOU is much more significant and brings a lot more people into those meetings, into those conversations in our current model. But yes, I mean, obviously there would be some cost associated with the model we have today.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Kaprowski.
Hi, Ethan. My comment is regarding our current pay-for-performance policies and how you would foresee that being affected by an MOU in terms of how our sworn personnel treated now with the pay-for-performance, and how is that addressed in an MOU situation?
Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Kaprowski, that's a good question. That's hard for me to answer because I'm not sure what the ask or the expectation might be in the meet and confer process regarding compensation. Again, I do know, that was why I presented some of the data with neighboring cities. I do know that obviously, I'm sure the Labor Association as well as we as an organization are aware of the fact that we are surrounded by cities that have a slightly different approach to their benchmarking or their comp philosophy. So I would imagine that there would be some requests made to sort of match or keep us in line with those cities. And as I pointed out, there's really just cost associated with that. It's in my opinion, it's not so much a decision about coming to a consensus as making a determination if where the funding would come from, the funding source, and if that is feasible for the town of Gilbert.
Is there any separate, like, merit-based pay or anything above and beyond base compensation that's not, like, overtime?
Councilmember Kaprowski, the merit component is built in. So in a non-sworn scenario, we have a merit matrix, which we roll out each year, and that is based on the annual performance rating of the employee. I guess I would say the benefit to the compensation model that exists within our sworn